You need to understand that when someone avoids emotional closeness, it is not always because they do not care about you. It is not always because they have forgotten. And it is not always because your presence meant nothing. Sometimes it is simply the only way they know how to survive their own feelings. And you may have spent countless nights wondering if you were too much or if you pushed too hard. And in reality, it is not about you at all. It is about the way their heart learned to protect itself from vulnerability, the way their nervous system flinches at closeness, the way they equate intimacy with danger even when all they want is connection. And you may have felt invisible in those moments, like your care, your love, your warmth was never enough to break through their walls, like the moments you shared were erased by silence, and that feeling of being forgotten can hollow you from the inside. Because humans are wired for reciprocity. Humans are wired for closeness. Humans are wired to be seen. And when the person who mattered to you most retreats, it can feel as if you never existed in their world at all. You need to understand that the silence of someone who avoids intimacy is loud to the heart that loves them. It reverberates in ways words cannot reach. It fills empty spaces with doubt. It whispers questions that have no answers. It makes you replay every interaction in your mind, searching for a clue, a sign, a reason, a moment when something shifted. And the truth is, there may be no simple answer. There may be no one thing that caused the distance. It is not a punishment. It is not a reflection of your worth. It is the reflection of a mind that cannot process emotions as freely as yours can. It is a mind that has learned that retreat is survival, that detachment is safety, and so they pull back. And in that pulling back, your love feels invisible, and your heart aches with a longing that cannot be sated by half measures, by crumbs of attention, by sporadic contact that leaves you questioning your value. And it is human to feel pain in this. It is human to want to reach out one more time, to explain yourself, to justify your feelings, to beg for reciprocity that may never come, because love is supposed to be a bridge, and when the bridge is one-sided, it feels like drowning in slow motion. You need to understand that what you interpret as being forgotten is often a struggle within them, a conflict they cannot voice, a battle they fight in silence, and it is not fair to you to bear the weight of their fear, their avoidance, their inability to stay present emotionally. And yet, that is what love with an avoidant can often feel like. It is carrying the weight of connection for two. It is speaking for both when only one voice is active. It is hoping that enough patience, enough understanding, enough tenderness will coax them into staying. And for a while, it may work. It may feel like they are close. It may feel like the heart you are offering is finally being seen. And then the pattern returns. The walls rise again. The distance returns, and you are left wondering if your heart will ever be safe in their presence. And the ache of being forgotten is compounded because you gave so much, you offered so much, and yet it feels as though none of it was enough to keep them near. It is exhausting, it is painful, it is a grief that arrives in fragments, not all at once, but in 1,000 small moments that remind you that someone you love deeply chose to retreat instead of staying. You need to understand that this is not your fault, and even though it feels like it, even though your mind will replay the moments endlessly, creating stories where you are the reason for the distance, the truth is that avoidance is a pattern. It is a habit. It is a coping mechanism. It is the armor that keeps them from being consumed by their own emotions. And the more you understand this, the more you realize that what you feel as being forgotten is often a reflection of their inner chaos, not a reflection of your value. And that understanding does not erase the pain. It does not make the longing disappear. It does not remove the nights when you feel invisible, but it begins to give context. It begins to give a framework to the confusion. It begins to show you that their silence, as painful as it is not a verdict on your worth. It is a symptom of a mind that cannot yet tolerate intimacy the way yours can. It is a map of their fear, not a map of your failings. And knowing this allows you to step back, not with coldness, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with clarity and compassion for yourself and for them. You need to understand that when someone avoids you, when they pull back, when it feels like they are gone even when they are physically near, it awakens a deeper truth about the way you must love yourself. It awakens the realization that your heart cannot be sustained by someone who cannot meet you. It awakens the understanding that you cannot fill the emotional gaps in someone else's life at the cost of your own peace. And the more you recognize this, the more you reclaim your dignity, the more you reclaim your voice, the more you reclaim the right to be fully seen and fully loved without having to chase, without having to beg, without having to explain, without having to shrink into the shadow of their fear. And this reclamation is what makes your presence magnetic. This reclamation is what shifts the balance of emotional energy. This reclamation is what can awaken the avoidant to the absence they once took for granted. Not because you need them to thirst for you, not because you are seeking validation, but because you have chosen yourself, because you have drawn a line between love and self-abandonment, between care and desperation, between connection and obsession, and in this choice you find freedom, you find peace. You find a heart that beats not in fear of being forgotten, but in rhythm with your own worth. And that is the most human, most beautiful truth of all. You need to understand that in their thirst, in their eventual awareness of what your presence meant, you are not responsible for soothing their regret, for repairing their realization, for being the balm to their discomfort. You are responsible for you, for your own heart, for your own healing. And once you embrace that responsibility, once you honor that sacred space within you, once you let your silence and your absence speak the clarity you could not say in words, something extraordinary happens, because they may thirst, they may ache, they may feel the absence sharply, but you are no longer defined by their patterns. You are no longer trapped in the emotional loops of their avoidance. You are no longer the person hoping for crumbs of attention or fleeting warmth. You are the person who finally understands that being forgotten by someone else does not diminish your value. Being forgotten does not erase your presence. Being forgotten is simply an opportunity to be fully present for yourself, and in that presence, your heart grows stronger, your clarity grows deeper, and your life becomes a landscape where love is no longer conditional. Love is no longer exhausting. Love is no longer defined by absence or fear, but by the truth that you and only you are your first and truest home. You need to understand that the moment you stop chasing someone who consistently retreats, the emotional landscape begins to shift in ways that may surprise you. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, like the subtle change of wind before a storm, and yet the effect is undeniable, because for so long you gave, you reached, you bent yourself into shapes you thought would make them stay. You convinced yourself that patience and understanding were enough to bridge the gap between their distance and your longing, and even when their attention was inconsistent, even when their words were minimal and their presence fleeting, you kept hoping, you kept loving, you kept holding the connection as if it were your sacred duty. And that relentless devotion, while noble, created a space where their emotional absence became normalized, a space where their retreats carried no consequences, and in that space, you often felt unseen, unheard, unvalued, as though your love existed in a vacuum, beautiful, generous, and painfully one-sided. You need to understand that when you finally reclaim your space, when you finally stop bending yourself to fill the gaps of their inconsistency, when you stop allowing their distance to dictate your self-worth, a remarkable thing begins to happen. The quiet absence you create is not empty. It is not passive. It is alive with clarity and self-respect. And for the first time in a long time, the person who once felt safe in your pursuit begins to feel the emotional void that you maintained for so long. It is a void that cannot be ignored. It is a quiet tension that presses against the walls they have built. It is a sensation that awakens the part of them they tried to hide from, the part of them that knows they cannot fully escape connection, that knows they cannot deny the bond you shared without feeling a subtle, gnawing loss. And it is in this realization that they begin to understand what your presence truly meant, not just the attention, not just the words, not just the patience, but the depth of commitment, the unwavering heart, the consistent care that they once took for granted because it had always been available, because it had always been forgiving, because it had always tolerated the distance that should have been unacceptable. You need to understand that this shift does not happen overnight, and it does not happen in a dramatic moment that validates your pain or rewards your patience. Instead, it happens in the quiet corners of everyday life. It happens when they notice a laugh they cannot hear, when they remember a warmth they cannot touch, when the realization dawns that the person they relied upon without effort is no longer within reach. And this awareness, subtle and persistent, awakens a longing they may not fully understand. It awakens an ache that feels foreign because it is new, because it is the first time they are encountering the absence of your emotional labor, and this is the true power of stopping the chase. It is not revenge. It is not manipulation. It is simply the natural consequence of reclaiming your dignity. It is the natural ripple effect that occurs when someone who has been comfortable in your devotion suddenly realizes they must reckon with your independence, and that realization can be startling because they have grown accustomed to the predictability of your availability. They have grown comfortable with your willingness to forgive. They have grown reliant on your heart to bridge the distance they themselves create. And when that bridge is removed, the landscape they thought they controlled begins to feel unstable. You need to understand that this is not about punishment. It is about emotional truth. It is about the reality that you cannot love someone into presence, that you cannot chase someone into consistency, that you cannot bear the weight of their emotional shortcomings without losing pieces of yourself. And the more you hold on to this, the more your clarity deepens, the more your self-respect strengthens, because it is in stepping back, in choosing your own well-being over their avoidance, that you are teaching yourself that love is not endurance at the expense of your heart. Love is not measured by how much you tolerate. Love is measured by presence, reciprocity, and care. And once you understand this, once you live this truth, the avoidant may begin to feel the thirst that comes from absence, the longing that comes from not having you to fill the gaps they once relied upon, and this thirst, while uncomfortable for them, is not the reason you step back. It is merely the side effect of you choosing yourself, the natural consequence of someone finally realizing that your love is not a resource to be exploited, but a gift to be honored. You need to understand that in this process, your heart may ache, your mind may question your decisions, your emotions may wrestle with doubt and guilt, because for so long you defined love as giving endlessly, as waiting patiently, as tolerating the imbalance, as hoping that devotion alone could awaken consistency. And it is human to grieve the loss of this pattern. It is human to miss the version of yourself that was willing to stretch beyond your limits. It is human to feel the sting of their absence, even when you know in your soul that the choice to step back is right, and that grief, as painful as it is also transformative because it signals that your heart is alive, that your capacity to care has not diminished, that your empathy is not gone, but that you are finally applying it wisely, that you are finally choosing to preserve the heart that you spent so long offering unconditionally. And in that preservation lies your true strength, the kind of strength that is quiet, steady, and unshakable. The kind of strength that does not need recognition, that does not seek validation, that simply exists as a force of integrity and self-respect. You need to understand that this awakening does not make you cold, it does not make you indifferent, it does not make you unreachable, it makes you human, fully and fiercely human. It allows you to feel without sacrificing yourself, to care without compromising your dignity, to love without losing sight of your worth. And in that space, you become magnetic, not because you are chasing, not because you are performing, not because you are desperate for acknowledgement, but because you are whole, because you are grounded, because you are living in a truth that cannot be ignored, a truth that others, even those who avoid closeness, cannot help but feel in the absence. And that is the quiet power of reclaiming your dignity. That is the emotional shift that comes from stopping the chase. That is the lesson that being absent with integrity can awaken longing, respect, and reflection in ways that presence under desperation never could. And in this awakening, you learn that the heart that once felt forgotten is never truly lost. It is simply learning to honor itself first. It is learning that you cannot be fully seen by someone else until you are fully seen by yourself. And that realization, deep and transformative, changes everything. You need to understand that this is not manipulation. This is not game playing. This is not revenge. It is the natural unfolding of a heart learning its own value. It is the narrative of self-respect written in everyday actions. It is the quiet, profound human truth that the moment you stop chasing, the avoidant may thirst, but you will be free. And freedom, not the longing of another, is the reward that your heart deserves. You need to understand that there comes a moment when you realize that their distance is not a reflection of your worth. It is not a measure of your love. It is simply the reality of their capacity. And that truth, as liberating as it is, can also pierce the heart like a quiet ache, because for so long You believed that closeness was earned, that attention was a reward, that their withdrawal meant something you could fix if only you tried harder, if only you explained more, if only you loved longer. And in that endless striving, you lost sight of yourself. You lost touch with the rhythm of your own needs, the clarity of your own voice, the steady beat of your own heart, and every late reply, every vague answer, every silence that stretched too long, chipped away at the foundation you had built for yourself without even realizing it. Because love without reciprocity, even when it feels tender, is quietly corrosive. It erodes patience, it erodes trust, and most of all, it erodes the belief that you deserve to be chosen fully, without hesitation, without ambivalence, without the constant question of whether your love is enough. You need to understand that the heartbreak of loving someone avoidant is not always loud, it is not always explosive. It is not the dramatic fight that fills the room with tension, it is the slow unraveling of certainty, the quiet exhaustion that seeps into your thoughts and dreams, the fatigue of always being the one to bridge the gap, to explain the emotions, to chase the connection, and the most difficult part is that you want to believe in them. You want to see their good days. You want to hold on to the moments when they show up in flashes of warmth. But those flashes, though beautiful, are not enough to sustain the heart that gives consistently, and you find yourself counting them like currency, wondering if the kindness they show is proportional to the love you give, and slowly, gently, painfully, you realize that no amount of hope, no amount of devotion, no amount of patience can make someone capable of emotional presence when they are not ready to be, and that realization, though painful, is the seed of your liberation, because once you see it, once you accept it, you begin to stop negotiating your worth. You begin to stop shrinking to fit their comfort. You begin to stop believing that your heart's capacity is the problem when the pattern has always been theirs to change. You need to understand that this awareness does not come without sorrow. It comes with quiet grief. It comes with the ache of missing someone who never fully belonged. It comes with the longing for a closeness that was only partial. And it comes with the internal conflict of wanting them and knowing that wanting them is not enough. It is not a justification to sacrifice your peace. It is not a reason to endure inconsistency. And in the midst of that grief, your heart begins to grow stronger, not in spite of the pain, but through it, because you are learning that resilience is not built on endurance of neglect. Resilience is built on honoring yourself, even when it hurts. Resilience is built on choosing clarity over confusion, consistency over uncertainty, respect over compromise, and as you stand in this space of clarity, the avoidant, who once thrived on your pursuit, begins to feel the weight of what they took for granted, begins to sense the depth of your absence, begins to realize that the connection they once controlled with distance is no longer theirs to manipulate. And that realization, slow and subtle, awakens a thirst they cannot easily ignore, because they were never used to you standing still, never used to you setting boundaries, never used to you valuing yourself above the insecurity of their emotional detachment. And in that stillness, in that firm choice to honor your own heart, they encounter a version of you that does not apologize for existing, does not negotiate access, and does not tolerate less than you deserve. You need to understand that the longing you feel when you step back is natural, it is human, it is the echo of love that has been real and profound, and it is not a weakness, it is not a mistake, it is a sign that your heart has the capacity to care deeply, to feel intensely, to commit fully, and yet even as you feel this longing, you must remember that the avoidance thirst is a reflection of their system, not your failure. Their inability to meet you fully is not your inadequacy, and their reaction to your boundaries is not proof that you were wrong to set them. It is proof that they relied on you being malleable, that they relied on you adjusting your love to fit their distance. And now that the dynamic has changed, now that you are anchored in self-respect, now that you honor your needs as much as your heart, they are forced to confront what they never had to face before. The reality of someone who will not bend for them, will not chase, will not tolerate less than clarity and care. And in that confrontation lies the quiet power of your choice. The power that does not yell, does not demand, does not seek validation. It simply exists, steady, unwavering, undeniable. You need to understand that this power does not mean you are cold. It does not mean you are detached. It does not mean you have stopped loving. It means you have matured. It means you have learned. It means you have become capable of holding love without sacrificing yourself. It means you have finally accepted that your heart is not a resource to be taken for granted. Your care is not a tool to fix someone else's avoidance. Your patience is not an excuse for inconsistency, and your tenderness is not a bargaining chip. And as you live in this truth, the avoidant begins to experience the very sensation they have denied you, the ache of uncertainty, the awareness of absence, the recognition that love is not infinite when it is unreciprocated, and that awareness, while uncomfortable for them, is not your responsibility. It is the natural consequence of being fully present for yourself. It is the inevitable ripple effect of someone choosing to honor their worth over someone else's. Fear of intimacy, and it is here in this balance of feeling and detachment that your emotional sovereignty emerges, the place where you are fully human, fully alive, fully capable of loving, without losing the self that deserves to be loved in return. You need to understand that this lesson is not selfish, it is essential. It is the way you teach yourself and others that love without respect is not sustainable, that longing without boundaries is dangerous, that attachment without reciprocity is painful, and that stepping back, standing firm, and allowing absence to reveal truth is not cruelty, it is courage. It is clarity. It is the quiet, steady, unshakable force of a heart that refuses to be diminished by someone else's inability to give fully. And in living this truth, in embodying this emotional integrity, you become magnetic not through pursuit, not through pleading, not through performance, but through presence, through consistency with yourself, through the steadfast knowledge that you are worthy of love, that chooses you, that nurtures you, that honors you. And as you live this way, you see the avoidant thirsting, not because you are vindictive, not because you are playing a game, but because they are finally meeting the reality of your absence, the clarity of your boundaries, and the unyielding value you place on your own heart. And in that space, you discover the profound human truth that loving yourself is the most radical, transformative, and heart-touching act of all, and the longing of another is simply the echo of a lesson finally learned.